Welcome to the work session for Monday, May 18th. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Scaringi,
Present.
Councilwoman Resinetti,
Present.
Councilwoman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
Councilman Strong,
Present.
President Scanlon,
Present.
7 here, 0 absent.
Okay, first thing on the agenda, we're going to hear from Carl Bernhardson and Steve Carson on the CDAC recommendations.
Hello, thank you for having us here this evening. So we're just presenting the recommendations that CDAC has put together for the spending of the COVID-related funds that we had the public hearing for previously. I'd like to point out that these are largely guidelines or suggestions meant to express the priorities that CDAC would like to see, especially in the CDBG funding portion, where we know that this is a ongoing and developing situation. So that's meant largely to be a percentage representation of how we feel based on the feedback we've gotten from the community and public hearings and outreach and contact with various nonprofit organizations that administer funds, how we think that this should be broken down. And I'll go line by line over our reasonings for those in just a second. The second portion is the ESG money, which is a much more specific representation of how much we expect to spend or how much we expect the city is likely to have to spend on these various programs. And it even includes the agencies that are most likely to be administering those funds. So let me just adjust my screen here a second. So starting with the CDBG funds, the first item there is the coordinated entry system upgrades, and the recommended amount there was the $263,200, and that was based off of the numbers that we were given by Northern Creations, which is the entity that administers the coordinated entry system. Coordinated entry is the system through which pretty much all calls that have to do with homelessness and housing needs are dispersed to the various agencies throughout the region. And I wanted to have Steve explain the sort of ongoing discussion about the cost for the upgrades for the computer and phone systems that are requested, if he could.
So we've had, me and Paul Nelson and I have talked with Jim Holst, who runs the coordinated entry system, about the numbers. He's given us some other variables. We asked him, for example, what would it be at 6 months if we only wanted to fund it for 6 months? What if we only wanted to fund it for a year? So he's given us some additional breakdowns which aren't reflected here. The 263.2 is Jim Holst's original recommendation for 2 years of funding for this. So we don't know if we'll even need all of that. Coordinated entry is required by HUD for ESG entry. However, it is not there's been no additional funding from HUD to cover it in light of the COVID crisis, and I don't know why that is. However, for us to utilize it, it would be a good idea for us to provide assistance through that. You cannot use ESG money to cover coordinated entry because of rules. So you'd have to use CDBG money to cover it. So it's essentially kind of an unfunded mandate from HUD. However, the good thing about it is it collects the data. It ensures regionally and technically at even a national level that it helps us collect data, make sure people aren't double dipping. it helps put people into the right locations for where they need assistance. For our specific case with COVID, it will enable us to handle what Jim is estimating, several thousand of calls that are going to come in as soon as we basically open up the rolls. And that'll be for both the CDBG and the ESG homelessness prevention, which Carl will talk about in a second. So does anyone have any questions about that? It's mainly an expansion of an existing program.
Yes, this is Angela.
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify, coordinated entry does cover the entire southern tier, correct?
Well, it covers the 5 counties of the COC.
Okay, so the monies from the Binghamton funding source would then help support everyone in the county, or all the 5 that you just mentioned?
Technically, they should just be handling the additional hirees and computers should just be for City of Binghamton specifically. So once an initial call comes in, they'll parse it out to whomever would handle it. If it's City of Binghamton, it'll go to the additional hirees that they're hiring for that.
Okay.
Will there be crossover? There could be crossover. I'll admit that it's entirely possible someone who should be handling city calls could be handling a non-city call periodically, but my understanding is that they will be specifically for City of Binghamton calls.
Okay, so this funding includes hires in terms of personnel as well, not
Correct.
just.
Two new hires, computers to handle them, the licensing fees and all that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Joe Burns. How many people are you going to be hiring, and how would one apply for that job?
I believe he's saying they're going to need between 1 and 2 case managers. How they were going to be hiring, I'm not sure. There is some requirements from background check perspective because they will be handling HIPAA data. So I'm not sure exactly how he's going to be hiring, whether he's going to be doing it an ad in the paper or something like that. I don't have the details on that. I can ask.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the coordinated entry? Okay. Moving on to the next line, we had the Broome County DSS temporary housing request. And this was a number that we got specifically from Broome County DSS for the amount that it would take to handle temporary housing costs that are related to COVID-19. And we followed their recommendation. It was at $208,283.00. Steve, has there been any updates on, I know that was sort of an ongoing conversation with the county. Has there been any new developments since we made our recommendations?
I haven't heard any new developments. However, I am understanding that additional money is potentially coming through the CARES program to the state, and then the state may be parsing it out to the county. What the county does with that, I don't know, but an eligible expense very well could be exactly what DSS is asking for.
Right. And to address the sort of previous question, that is money that would go towards addressing temporary housing in the city of Binghamton, the portion that Broome County would be covering, correct? Yes, that to my knowledge, that's how that would be. The next line is the CDBG homelessness prevention.
Oh wait,
this
sorry,
is,
this is Councilman Friedman. I have a question about the temporary housing. I don't know if you would have this information yet, but do you know what that would look like? You know, is this housing of vacant homes or in hotels? What does this temporary housing actually look like?
what we had mostly heard was hotels. There's been a lot of talk about using vacant homes, but just given the time frame that we're operating on, that it would take to get vacant homes in an occupiable state, seems somewhat unlikely. But yeah, from everything we heard, the vast majority of the temporary housing is going to be in hotels.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I should clarify, by vacant, I was, what I meant to refer to is housing that's not, has been abandoned for a while, but maybe housing that is up to code and habitable, but just nobody is living there at the moment.
All right. Oh, thank you. Any other questions on the temporary housing? Okay. The next line we had was CDBG homelessness prevention. This is something that the members of CDAC, wanted to ensure was prioritized. This was one of the things that we heard the most request for through the public hearing and communications from the public. And the amount that we put in there was the $161,764. The idea being that this HUD money is meant to address housing concerns, homelessness prevention. If you can keep people from ending up as homeless, that is HUD money well spent. It addresses, individuals who are coming out of incarceration situations, people who are on the cusp of homelessness, people who are, unable to make their rents for the month. That all of that would fall within the homelessness prevention. So anything that you could do to keep somebody in a home, this bracket would cover. So it's broad and intentionally broad, because there are many agencies and departments that would be addressing this. So just the point is to allocate a appropriately large sum towards that end. Any questions there? Okay, moving on. CDBG mortgage assistance, along those same lines. Those who are unable to make payments on their homes, which would threaten their having a home through the COVID-19 crisis, would be able to have access to these funds in order to help make their mortgage payments. Any questions, need for clarification there?
What are the guidelines? What are the guidelines for them to be able to qualify for this, Carl?
So Steve would probably have a better understanding of the specific guidelines for qualification. I assume City of Binghamton resident is one of them. Are there other guidelines that you'd be able to outline, Steve?
So sure, for any CDBG program, just in a general sense, an individual or family must be below a certain level of income. For a two-person household, currently that limit is $48,700 a year. And that's from all sources of income, all gross income coming into the household. That's actually hard to do if both people are working. And so I've done this long enough that I can see how often it occurs. But if you have one adult or one person working and the other person is a child or someone not working, very often that will push them underneath. That's a very common scenario. So it's all based off of household size. So they have to be city residents, they have to be below 80% income of the LMI income, and that's generally it. The other requirement we're going to have, well, COVID requires them to prove that the COVID situation has caused them to have a problem. And they're also going to have to have exhausted other sources. So they have to make sure they've applied for unemployment if possible. They've applied for other sources of funding. And so kind of we're going to see this as a last ditch effort to keep them in their homes.
Other questions on this?
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
For problems with mortgage, are we holding? I mean, once you get the okay to spend the money will start to be spent. But I would have a concern that there are people that have getting themselves into forbearance that come August, September, they're going to have to start paying a larger payment, pay back the forbearance. They're going to have to start paying back a larger payment than they've been used to. So let's say their jobs come back, but they never had the money to make a larger payment. They've been living their life, paycheck to paycheck. So is it possible to hold back some money until August, September, when we see if these people are falling into trouble, the average Joe that in Binghamton?
I can speak to that. In general, none of our rental assistance programs are going to even go out until August or September anyway. I could see the mortgage being the same way in the utility payment, simply because there's a moratorium on people being evicted and have their utilities shut off. So a lot of this is us getting set up and ready and planning for that eventuality. With the mortgages, it's really going to come down to whether the bank is allowing them, is basically tacking a couple of extra payments on the end of their mortgage, or for more, I don't know, not nice banks, if they're trying to come after them. Those are the situations we're going to be we want to use these monies to deal with. Not the people that the banks were nice and said, all right, we'll just tack you a couple payments on at the end. It's the ones that are having foreclosure threats and stuff like that we would be using this mortgage assistance. Your scenario is an interesting scenario, and we haven't talked about that. I can definitely talk with that with Paul, and if the mayor wants to, I believe the mayor is wanting to do this, but we can hammer out some final details on that to perhaps provide them a couple of months worth of payment to reduce that back to their original mortgage payment. But we can talk about that, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on mortgage assistance? All right, Carl, move on to business assistance, please.
All right, business assistance, same idea, businesses that are in need of funds due to COVID-19. CDAC decided that basically the reasoning was for the 150, and 160 and change, was sort of breaking down the three major priorities based on the sort of lion's share of the funding that CDAC found were brought to us by the community, and business assistance was one of them. Steve, you would be able to more quickly and accurately describe the parameters that businesses would have to meet in order to request this funding. Would you be able to do that for me?
Yeah, well, first off, this business assistance is one of those things we could do much quicker than anything else. Like I said, the other ones are kind of wait until September, until the moratorium ends. But what we're looking at is possibly not just providing maybe a loan or a grant to a business directly, but paying their utilities or their rents. And we may tie that into their ability to retain or hire new employees that are qualified, income qualified. So we're still hammering out the final details on that. So, and the short of it is, we could probably do that sooner than anything else, but we're still hammering out final details.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions? Okay. The next item that we had was COVID cleanup relief. This is money to be made available to institutions and organizations that need to have increased standards of cleanliness due to COVID-19. I feel that one's pretty self-explanatory, but if there are any questions. The next one on the list is the domestic violence rehousing. We heard a great deal of concern from the community about making sure that there was funds available for domestic violence situations, and housing is one of the best ways to, or rehousing is one of the best ways to address those concerns rapidly, especially during a crisis. So we wanted to make sure that there was a dollar amount there to prioritize that concern during this crisis. And then sanitation and protection supplies, that's meant to cover not just personal protective equipment, but any supplies that would be needed for the sanitization process. Any questions on those items? Okay. At the bottom here, we have the recommendations for ESG. The first one is for homelessness prevention, which would be administered by the Family Enrichment Network. The $486,557 is from them, their estimation of the cost that it would take for them to administer their homelessness prevention program. Same goes for the shelter sanitization through the VOA. That's the amount that they quoted as necessary, and YWCA street outreach, the $46,200 to cover their programs. The CDAC has, as long as I've been involved and as long as many of the members that I have worked with have been involved, has taken these recommendations from the COC very seriously. They've shown honesty in the amount that they request. So we just quoted their requests and put them in for our recommendation. And you, I believe, were distributed their packet of requests when we had our public hearing a number of weeks ago. So you have the documentation to back up their reasoning behind those numbers. Steve, am I missing anything that you would consider important for ESG?
No, I think you got it all.
Okay. The final point that I would like to make, so in the CDBG funding, CDAC would very much have liked to have had assistance for nonprofit organizations that are, struggling for the same reasons that businesses are, that provide services throughout our community. However, HUD guidelines as they stand did not allow for funds to be distributed in that way, and we've put together a communication which we intend to put out there expressing CDAC's collective displeasure with this state of affairs. So I wanted to make sure that was noted as an explanation why there isn't a nonprofit organization funding line in CDBG, and that there's a letter forthcoming. So that concludes everything that I had to say about this. Any questions from City Council members? Yes.
Go ahead, Angela. I have a question.
Yes, but we have to wait for formal recognition, right? Or no?
So, Councilwoman Riley, got a question? Go ahead. Joe, you're next.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Bernhardson and Mr. Carson, I want to thank you guys and the entire CDAC for taking the lead with this effort. I think the community forum and all of the public forums that were held, I know there was one held Monday that I think there was some confusion about in terms of the public even knowing about the hearing. But nevertheless, thank you for just crafting this language so that it is clear to the public how these funds are the spending recommendation from CDAC. Just for clarification though, also for the public and those that may be watching right now, this is not a first come, first serve type of process in terms of once the money has been voted on and approved and budget lines outlined. There will be some type of formal process for determining who receives the funds, how one applies for the funds, and that will be sent out for, again, public knowledge and information.
I believe that process is ultimately set for specifically for the COVID-19 money. That's through the mayor's office. How that process is going to be set, as opposed to through CDAC. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but.
Right, correct. No, we know it's through CDAC, but I do want to clarify that it's not, again, a first come, first serve, or just the process will be outlined for the public so that everyone is aware and we won't have some kind of backlash because everyone will be informed.
That would certainly be my hope and the hope of CDAC. And I believe that that's the way that it is going to be carried out. So
So Steve, can you comment? Thank you, Carl.
Well, it's ultimately up to the mayor's office how they're going to do it. The current plan is once the programs are set up and ready to go, we'll do some sort of or some sort of press release, some sort of advertisement, some sort of way of letting the community know. Once that occurs, unfortunately, yes, once people are qualified, it will be first come, first served, just like a Section 8 program would be handled. I've had experience with Section 8 before, and once the roles are open, boom, you get hundreds of people applying, and you kind of have to treat them. If they qualified and they applied 5 minutes before the next person, we have to handle that person who applied first as opposed to the next one. The only circumstances where that would differ possibly are if you shave off subgroups. So for example, CDAC had a recommendation for domestic violence. If that's the case, the way we can handle that is we can basically treat domestic violence as a separate pool. So when people call in, if they apply for domestic violence, they'll get to access that funding that no one else would be able to apply for. I can't speak to the mayor's office, honestly. So I don't know. My understanding is there will be a press release when we're ready to go. There will be a public announcement in some manner, but I don't know the specifics of it. That's up to the mayor's office on how they want to handle it.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Can you also clarify, this is different funding from what will be discussed for the 5-year and the 2020 annual plan, correct?
Correct. That will be approved, I think, the next, or that will be the recommendation, I believe, will be at the next work session, which is the first week in June, I believe. That's it. And you had that question about the public hearing last week. That was specifically for that plan. So it wasn't for COVID. Although at this point, we've kind of, if people ask about COVID, we try to include the COVID comments, and if they talk about the other things, refer to them to the con plan.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Councilman Burns, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. For Carl, I guess, does the city itself, can we qualify for some of the money, such as the $50,000 that we've been spending, that we approved to clean City Hall every day, twice a day or whatever, or for other expenses?
I know that with normal CDBG funds, the city certainly is eligible, and I don't see a reason why the city wouldn't be able to make an application for these funds. Steve is the person who is ultimately sort of administering HUD programs. Am I correct in that?
In general, and normal governmental expenses are not eligible under CDBG. There are some special circumstances. For example, fire equipment is generally eligible, but I guess I'm not talking about here. In regards to the cleaning, I literally asked specifically for that. They went back and forth, but ultimately they told us that the sanitizing of City Hall would not qualify under CDBG. That's just something that HUD has said. So that's just the way it is, unfortunately. Sometimes we have to hammer them out because, like I said, general governmental expenses are ineligible, but sometimes they'll allow you to do certain things. Unfortunately, sanitation was not one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on any of these items? Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On the RL 29.7, Chief, you're up.
You want to sit there, wherever you want to sit.
Good evening. Just an RL for a 1-year extension of our ambulance, an agreement with our ambulance billing company. We've been extremely happy with them up until today.
Any questions or comments on this? Thank you, Chief. That was quick and easy.
Thank you.
Ed Crum, we'll go on to you now. We're going to move on to RL 29.9. Ed Crum is here.
I think Lori.
I'm here.
Lori's on the.
All right. Lori, hang on 1 second. We'll do Ed Crum while he's here, okay?
That's fine.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
RL 20-99 is for an amendment to 2020 Joint Sewage Board budget to add funding for a mechanics assistant position, which is going to come from defunding a mechanic position that's currently vacant for the remainder of the year, so that that money comes across. And then there's a difference of 5,000. I forgot how much it is. 5,000 something. $5,813. That's going to go from personnel to contingency because the mechanics assistant position is less. The reason this is necessary is because when the mechanics assistant positions were defunded in the budget process last year, we had 5 mechanics. So we didn't have a need to bring somebody on and get the experience as a mechanics assistant to fill a mechanic position. But now we have a situation where one of the mechanics advanced, was selected to another more responsible position at the plant. So we have a vacancy we need to fill. And in order to fill that under the job description, which I emailed to everybody, you have to have 3 years service as a mechanics assistant at the plant, which is a preferable way to go because then they're actually working on the equipment at the plant, adding value to the plant in terms of the maintenance. Or you have to have 3 years experience with mechanical maintenance in the civilian world, which isn't necessarily something that we're going to find in the current economy. You know, somebody that has a relevant experience on pumps and other equipment. So that's why we're asking for this budget modification to be approved.
Questions or comments on this? Thank you, Mr. Crum.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you.
Lori, tell us about 20-98, please.
Okay, we're requesting to transfer $9,280 from a position in the engineering department. It's the person is on leave right now, so the funds aren't being spent, into the hardware software line in the IT department. Earlier this year, the engineering department needed to purchase surveying equipment and they didn't have the funds to do it at that point. So I paid for them out of my line so they could have the equipment in place when the construction season started, with the agreement that when there was enough money in an unfilled salary line that they would return the money to me so we could use it for the hardware software that we needed this year.
Questions or comments on this? Lori, while I have you here, is there a way for us to make the screen, the boxes smaller to have more than 6 people on here?
I don't know. I will find that out though. I'll research it tomorrow.
If you could, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Lori. Jared, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Tell us about 29-6, please.
This is regarding a transfer property to the DOT. Everyone was copied in on an email today from Corporation Counsel regarding this acquisition. The parcels that I talked about in the last council meeting, maybe been that one or the one before, was regarding areas of MacArthur Park. This is more the extension in the Ivanhoe Road area. And from a practical standpoint, DOT has the right to acquire this property for this purpose. So, you know, the RL is basically the last step in certifying a $15,000 payment. You know, it is not advised that we, you know, challenge that assessment. It won't change any plans, that type of thing. So DOT, with their right-of-way acquisition, has an entire division working on this. This is required as part of the DOT's project.
Questions or comments on this? Thank you, Jared.
Agent, I think.
Angela, you got one? I'm sorry. Angela Riley's got a question. Go ahead.
Yes, just for clarification for me, this is a different plot of land that we are now moving forward with compared to the previous RL with a different, again, a different PIN number, a different parcel, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just for my own, for when we look back in terms of reviewing RLs, is it possible to just update what parcels? I know it says a PIN number, but can we update it so we know which piece of land we're specifically voting to approve?
What do you want to see it on a map type of thing?
No, I just need some clarification. So for the proposed title, for example, it says a resolution authorizing the city to accept payment and for the mayor to execute any agreement, which we're not doing. We're moving to vote on this one agreement for one particular parcel. So if we can just clarify the language on some of our documentation so we know that this RL aligns to a certain, it's one agreement and not any agreement, and it aligns with one particular parcel. So then we know this RL goes with the explanation that was given to us this afternoon compared to the RL that explained the different parcel. Just, and perhaps, maybe I'm the only one that thought it was a little bit confusing, but just for clarification.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I'm looking on the sheet from the DOT, and I don't know if there's an address. I think they have different parcels because, them not dealing in addresses and more in frontage and everything. I could see what you mean. I don't know, or I don't have it in front of me, the last RL that was considered. So I'll ask Corp Counsel to see if they can get if there's a nomenclature that makes it clear exactly what's being looked at from a location standpoint, because I don't see any addresses on here.
No, and again, the PIN number is there, but when we go back 5 years from now, we want to make sure that we're able to readily align this RL with the plot and the additional information that is being requested, for example. And then I would also like to update the language because we're saying the mayor to execute an agreement opposed to any agreement.
And I'm not sure, this was written by Corporation Counsel. They had that language down. I'm not sure why that versus any versus a.
Yeah, Jared, this is Matt speaking. I think that's probably just a typo.
Okay.
That's my guess. I mean, Ken drafted that up, so I'll definitely double check with him tomorrow. But I mean, on the agenda, the title says "an agreement." Tonight's agenda, so I'm pretty sure that was just a typo.
Okay. But again, when we're going back 5 years from now, we won't see necessarily the agenda. We'll see.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll look into that tomorrow for you. See if we can come up with a way to do that. That's easy, so we can, like you say, when we're looking back, we know exactly what we're looking at.
Thank you.
Other
Yeah,
questions?
I have something,
Sure.
and that is, I guess it's going to be voted on Wednesday. I'm going to vote no, because I think that the whole Ivanhoe thing, we just lived through this. Whether or not you think your rights were taken away during this pandemic or not, I believe some of mine were, and I think that a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking needs to be done so that the next time it happens, that I won't be told as an adult that I can't go out after 10 o'clock at night driving around because it makes me comfortable to do that. Not that I do that, but I should be able to leave my house whenever the hell I want and go wherever I want. But this goes right back to it. We are saying that we think that the Department of Transportation can go up and take these people's land who don't want to give it up. They've been there. They've been paying taxes on it for 30 years. And all these people that were protesting about their rights and all this stuff, this is exactly what they're talking about. The government overreaching. This segment of let's all build it. I think it's great. Connect BU to the downtown. But this one segment, nobody on the street wants it. They've got 150. If you count the 150 houses that signed the petition against it, that is almost all the houses right around there. And the people that own it don't want to give up the land. And it's the government saying, hey, thanks a lot for paying the taxes for 30 years. To hell with you. You know, it's Ruby Ridge. You know what I'm saying? I just can't stand the thought of it. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question. As a follow-up to kind of what Joe said, you said that it won't change anything if we don't do this with the Department of Transportation, they can take it anyway. Where does this piece fit in with the other pieces that Joe's referring to that have to make this Ivanhoe spur down to the project? Do we know how many other people are affected personally? I mean, so the city's part must be the part down by the road. I would kind of like to see a map, because I don't know, is our part that we're talking about here down by 434, I'm assuming, and then up the hill to Vestal Ave? How many more parts of land do we know that? Is DOT going to have to get to make this happen? And does our voting yes or no have any bearing on the rest of the land that the DOT is going to need between 434 and Vestal Ave to do this?
I can speak to what I know through work. The DOT can take whatever land they want to. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. And I hear Joe Burns' concerns. I hear the people over there's concerns, but it's hard to fight the DOT sometimes. You can argue, but it's hard to fight them. Not that everybody should give up on it, but I think it's difficult to argue with them when they have a plan.
No, I understand that, but my question is, how many other pieces of land do they?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is Matt. I'm not sure if Jared has the answer. I personally do not have the answer, but I just wanted to just clarify a point that Council President Scanlon made, that the DOT basically can take land, pursuant to public condemnation or eminent domain, whatever you want to call it. But it has to be for a public use, and there has to be just compensation. So what we're talking about tonight, the amount of money that the city would be getting is that just compensation. So, I mean, there is a mechanism where you can challenge the DOT's determination, but as Council President Scanlon said, it's an uphill battle, and it's almost always a losing one. But as far as Councilman Strawn's question, I would defer to Jared. I'm not sure if Jared, if you have the answer to that, but I can certainly look into that tomorrow.
Yeah, in terms of a map, I can remember in the meeting at MacArthur, there were some maps. We can get those and distribute them to City Council that show the different right-of-way acquisitions. I think the majority of the land was this city land as it relates to the project, but we can request those.
Other questions?
This is Councilwoman. Oh, sorry. I have a question in terms of the process. So I'm just curious if the sort of general consensus is no matter how we vote, it doesn't matter, then why does it have to come through us if our vote, it seems to be, won't really have any effect on the project?
Matt, it's a formality, isn't it, in the end?
Essentially, yes, but what you're voting on is to accept the payment. So you can vote to accept the payment or vote to not accept the payment, and the project moves forward regardless.
But they'll pay us if we by accept, for me to accept the money. I'm approving what they want to do to these poor people. So I say, let them take it from the city the same way they're going to take it from them. But that's just me.
Other questions or comments? Okay, Grace, on the pending legislation. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I just want to echo that sentiment. As a homeowner, I'm absolutely disgusted that a state level bureaucracy can come in at that level, even if it is for public use, and taking someone's private property like that when there has, even in a formal, open way, been such negation and pushback against it, particularly for the homeowners over on Ivanhoe over there. I know Councilman Strawn and Councilman Burns have both been involved with a number of public meetings that have been going on the south side. And I got to be honest, I mean, if they can do that on the south side, they can do that on the west side, they can do that on the east side, they can do that in the ward, they can do that anywhere in the city. And that, quite frankly, scares the living hell out of me. I'm not sure, maybe this is a question for court counsel, but does the city literally have no recourse with respect to tax-paying homeowners that elected us to represent them when a state body comes in and says, we're doing it anyway? Because to me, that's just, and I understand that that particular dynamic may be something related to the state, because generally speaking, as a broad rule, New York State generally operates with, as it relates to zoning, you know, bottom up, meaning that the lowest level of government has the highest level of say. Even though this project obviously is relevant to a public use, that's just mind blowing to me.
Well, Councilman, what I can say is the city could challenge, but as I said, it's probably a losing battle. Just looking at previous court cases, the case law, it's generally pretty clear that if it's public use, there's just compensation. You have DOT appraisers involved, determining what the appropriate amount of money is for the property that's being taken. You meet those requirements, and the state can pretty much do what it wants. So yeah, I mean, the only other thing I'll say is, if you'd like a little bit of bedtime reading, Supreme Court case Kelo versus City of New London. That was a big time case in the state of Connecticut involving eminent domain. So that kind of set the stage for more recent, eminent domain type issues. So, if you're curious, I would encourage you to read that particular case. But yeah, at the end of the day, I want to say it's 30 days that you have to challenge the agency's determination, the agency being DOT in this case. But yeah, I think that would obviously require some more discussion with Ken in particular.
Right, Matt, forgive me. I heard you say the name of the Supreme Court case versus New London, Connecticut. What could you please spell the first name that you had written there? Thank you.
Kelo, K-E-L-O.
Thank you. And is that SCOTUS or is that Connecticut Superior Court?
That, I believe, if I remember correctly, is SCOTUS. That is a Supreme Court case, so that is the law of the land.
If I may say something, I heard, can I say something, Mr. President? I heard what Matt was saying about the appraisal, and I guess I keep thinking back to what Councilman Burns said regarding the sense of injustice that I think a lot of people are feeling regarding this. And although there was an appraisal for that particular parcel, I'm just throwing it out there, it doesn't really do anything for appraising folks' properties and how it impacts the value of their homes, right? I mean, that's never discussed in any of this, is it? When DOT or other bigger powers go out there and make these sort of decisions, do they ever reevaluate folks' properties, how it impacts them, the property, the value of their property moving forward with this change that's going to happen in the neighborhoods? Probably not, right?
My
Matt,
knowledge, no, Councilwoman.
they use a fair market value, don't they, Matt?
I believe so, Councilman. Yes.
Okay.
They do the appraisal at the time, fair market value. Yep.
Okay.
May I say something?
Sure.
It's fair market value according to them. I mean, I had some things right on my shelf here that you could offer me any money you want, and I'm not going to sell it to you. The government might tell you that it's fair market value. So that's just crap if you ask me. But what about the houses that are going to be right across from that entrance? I personally have a lot of privacy at my house. If they, I wouldn't be able to sell my house if they put an entrance for a hiking trail right across the street. So that's what that's another thing that people are talking about. They've had this privacy for all these years, and now suddenly, well, I don't think anybody's going to be using it anyway, but that's another story.
And the other issue with that is that payment of fair market value now is not indicative of fair market value in the future. So if that payment is made at that level now, but then it decreases the market value of your home and your property down the road, that payment might be some short-term offering in relation to what they're doing, but that doesn't mean that that value is going to hold down the road, because like Councilman Byrd said, you either lost your privacy or you lost the view or you don't want to live there anymore, and then that negative domino effect continues.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Councilman Riley.
So please clarify for me. So this money that the DOT is offering for fair market value is going back to the city, not to the property owners, correct?
There's more than one piece, I think, that needs to be done.
It's a separate deal.
Yeah, it's a separate, yeah.
Okay,
There's
so
more, that's what I was asking. There's more than one piece that gets from 434 up to Vestal, I think.
which is why I wanted the clarification in the legislation request, the RL, because again, we need to know what's happening, how many are coming, and who ultimately is the recipient of the 15,000 if voted to move forward.
Right.
The recipient is the city.
So we would get some and then other people would get some.
Yeah,
Oh.
okay, so just to clarify here, the RL and anything that city council would vote on has to do with city-owned property. Any agreement, right-of-way agreement between the New York State DOT and a private property owner would be handled between those two entities. The city would not have to approve or have any discussions about that transaction between DOT and the private property owners. And this is Jared, by the way, sorry.
Other questions or comments on this? Thank you, everyone. On the grace for pending legislation, please.
Okay, so right now there's two for pending legislation, RL 20-93, allow the sale of tobacco products at 494 and a half Shenango Street, where it's not permitted, and RL 20-94, agreement with NYSEG for new 911 cell tower at Ely Park Golf Course. As of right now, we have one council member that pulled their name off the RL 20-93. So if anybody else would like to pull their names off either of these, just let us know now, or you can email us. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, what happened?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is Councilwoman Riley, and I am pulling my name from 2093.
Okay, yes, I do have you marked for that one. So if anybody else wants to pull their name off anything, just let me know.
Can we let you know now?
Yeah, you can let us know now, or email us, whatever works.
Okay,
also-
I think I would also like to pull my name from 2093, please.
Okay, I will mark that as well.
I'm going to comment on 2093. So there's a business, obviously a new business going in there, and he's requesting to sell tobacco, and his competitors across the street and down the street, not far away, are selling tobacco. So I'm going to support this because I think we're going to handcuff the guy. That's my opinion now. We're going to handcuff the guy when he opens the door by not allowing him to sell tobacco when his competition is. So I'm just stating what my feelings on that. That's all.
I think since there is legislation that was voted on by our predecessors in 2014, and this is the first time this type of request has come before council, we need to look at what is actually in the documents and legislate appropriately.
Matt, maybe you have an answer to this, Matt. When there's a store, it's not a Marabito, but it's another convenience store. Right, that butts the property butts the schools, Theodore Roosevelt School. And I think they were there before the legislation from Albany, which prohibited sales from 500 feet of a school. I think that's how they got to sell tobacco. They were in there before the law was enacted.
I believe that's correct. I know Brian knows the answer to that, but I believe that's correct. Brian's been around long enough that I believe he remembers that.
Right, and therefore, on the council I was on before, we granted the guy literally across the street from him, the Northside Deli, to be able to sell tobacco because the convenience store across the street was selling. So that's the history I have, and that's what in answer to you, Councilman Riley, on the history I know about that.
So you're saying council did approve the variance in the past?
Yes. Because the competition across the street was selling tobacco.
But I thought, this is Councilwoman Friedman, I was under the impression that the authority to grant variances like that was given to City Council in December of 2019.
Well, then maybe I had that wrong. Maybe the ZBA granted them, or the planning commission, somebody did them.
Yes, it was ZBA at that time. This is the first time it's coming before council based upon the change that occurred in 2019, from my understanding. And we also, just a lot of things, if you look at what Binghamton is being recognized nationally and at least regionally, if you look at some of the tobacco legislation and supporters of preventing smoking in children for our policy. And if we continue to override the policy, it leads us to question, why did our previous councilmen and women push for such legislation? And what are we going to do? Now, there are different ways we can address it, but again, that's something we can discuss. We can look at Endicott, who has added a lot of new language to prevent oversaturation of markets, particularly underrepresented markets with smoking products and marketing to children. So there's definitely ways we can address it.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong. I lost my thought. Never mind. Forget it, man. I apologize.
No problem.
I will have to contact the clerk. I'm actually very torn about this, and I think I talked about it a little bit last time we met. I feel like I hear that, look, there are rules on the books, and it doesn't seem like we're following them, and I find that to be problematic. So, and then there's this other side where, you know, I feel bad for this person who's looking to, you know, have this small business and to compete with folks around him. And I don't want in any way, shape, or form to sort of discriminate, you know, and say, well, this person could and can, and you cannot. And so, yeah, there's just, I might be one of those that pulls my name from this as well, but I'm just not quite sure yet. There's just something about it that doesn't feel right.
Man, I remember what I was thinking. Could the city be open for a lawsuit if we denied this because this competition can sell tobacco?
I mean, off the top of my head, I would say no. I mean, the city council has the authority here. You take a vote and that's it. I mean, if they want to bring a lawsuit alleging discrimination, they're welcome to do that. My guess is it wouldn't get very far. But yeah, my answer would be no.
Well, I'm not even thinking about like the legal piece, which I know as city council, we should be. I'm thinking more about like the whole ethical piece to this whole thing. When you feel like somebody else got a pass for something and then you're not for whatever reason, so I'm not necessarily talking about, anyone coming after the city and, moving forward with a law. So it just feels kind of yucky and wrong, and as if we were kind of being put in the position to discriminate against this person who just wants to do business. And then on the other hand, then why do we have rules, right? If we're not going to follow them. I don't know.
Can I make one point, Mr. President? My thought, maybe I'm looking at it too simplistically. I mean, you can't get there, I don't know, like substance over form. You can't get there in less than 500 feet practically. So I'm looking at it, and maybe that's way too simplistic a way to look at it, but I was at the Planning Commission meeting. I think Councilman Burns was there. I mean, these guys made a great presentation. I'm just saying, they're most likely this project isn't going to happen at all. And I just want to throw that out there. This isn't just going to hamstring them. My understanding, and maybe we can get clarification, is that we need to at least think about that. This isn't going to happen at all, from my understanding from the planning meeting, if this doesn't happen. And you can't get there in less than 500 feet practically on the sidewalk. So, I'm just throwing out there kind of the way I'm looking. If it was right next to the school, 100 feet away, to me, maybe the rule needs to be changed that it's 500 feet walking distance, not 500 feet through fences. But that's just the way I'm looking at it.
By the way, I don't see grade school kids buying cigarettes.
What? Please repeat that for me.
I don't see grade school kids buying cigarettes or being allowed to.
There's lots of
high school or a middle school, I may be more concerned about it.
Wait, say it again.
I don't see great kids,
Elementary school.
elementary kids, thanks, Joe, buying cigarettes.
There's literature.
If it was next to a high school or a middle school, I'd be more concerned.
They can't buy them, right?
Yeah, the elementary, I don't see the guy selling cigarettes.
They can't even pretend they're old enough to buy them, so
I just don't picture that happening. A 10-year-old coming in and saying, "Can I have a pack of cigarettes?" and him saying, "Okay, here." There's a law against selling the cigarettes already.
Right.
So to go back to what I was just talking about, the government overreaching. I mean, there you go.
Other questions or comments?
Councilman Scringy.
Gio.
Thanks, Mr. President. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm going to support this because in the same way that I don't want the city of Binghamton telling a private business owner what they should be selling, I don't want the state of New York telling homeowners how they can deal with their property. So.
Okay.
May I add something? This is Councilwoman Friedman.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to echo what Councilman Resinetti was saying, that I do want to emphasize the fact that this is not a decision that I am making lightly, and I do feel torn because there are benefits for voting yes or no. And I think it is an uncomfortable position to be put in, where we were not on council when the previous variances were granted, nor were we on council when the authority to grant the variances were given to city council. So it's an uncomfortable position to be in, because the precedent that we are being asked to consider is the exception rather than the rule. And that, that makes me uncomfortable. And while I absolutely don't, it's in my district, and I want to bring business to my district, and it's tough. On the other hand, we are not saying to this person, you can't open a business. It's just one product that they are not allowed to sell. And I remember not too long ago, there were a bunch of advertisements on the side of the bus shelters at the bus stops along Court Street. And it was a picture of children purchasing some something at a convenience store, and right behind the counter is all of these tobacco products. And the point that was being made was that this is tobacco advertising. So even if they're not buying tobacco products or cigarettes at that time, they are still being exposed to the brands and the colors on the packaging and everything like that. I forget who, it wasn't an advertisement, it was a PSA that was on the billboard. So this is a really, really tough decision to make. And I think it's important to weigh the benefits with the drawbacks. Is the benefit of allowing, is the benefit that the business owner will have, does that outweigh the potential drawbacks of children being exposed to stores that sell tobacco that close to their school? So I do, my main point is that this is not a decision that I think any of us are taking lightly, but it is an uncomfortable position to be put in. So I just wanted to say my thoughts out loud. Thank you.
Can I say something? Can they get there during the day? They don't let elementary kids out, right? So they could go to the store at night and that's okay, but during the day, how would they even get out of school to go there?
I'm imagining on their walk home, they might pass it and pick something up.
But that could happen at the other two stores. I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know. It just, that could happen at night or on the weekend, or, I mean, during school, they can't get out. I don't think they let elementary kids out for lunch and stuff like that. So maybe it's a dumb way to look at it, but I mean, they're gonna, I don't know. I don't know how you're really, I don't know what you're really protecting them from in the end, quite frankly. I do know what they're protecting them from, but I don't know how you really are with all the other stores unless you just, try to ban cigarette sales as a whole. I mean, they're going to be exposed to it no matter what. So,
And I think that this is one product that does make a difference for a convenience store. I mean, people that smoke cigarettes, they buy, you're going to go for your milk. I'm not going to go there. I can't get my cigarettes there.
they're not going to do the deal at all, from what I understand. So you have to think about that when you're weighing the pros and cons.
I agree with Councilman Burns. This could probably make or break a convenience store. This one product, because I'm sure it's a big seller, and I'm sure. And by the way, if we're gonna do this, deny this, and I don't know how everybody's gonna vote. I don't care how everybody's gonna vote. But if we're gonna deny this at this point, how many places in Binghamton sell cigarettes? How many stores? 100? I don't know.
All of them. Well, this is, again, this is.
The White's Market sells them. I mean, we can't, and obviously, when we're here from Corporation Council, we can't go backwards and say, the convenience store, you can't have that, and the Northside Deli, you can't sell cigarettes anymore. We can't go backwards. So I hear what everybody's saying, but if, like I said, if it was next to a high school, by the way, it's 500 feet, as Phil said, as the crow flies. So I'm not sure how they measure that, but it says the crow flies is 500 feet. So if it was next to a high school, I'd be more concerned. Next to a middle school, I'd be more concerned. But next to a grade school, these grade kids aren't going to be able to buy cigarettes. So I'm not sure who we're protecting here.
Again, I think, as echoing Councilwoman Freeman, it's very hard for all of us, but the council members before us worked hard to support this legislation. And again, Binghamton was recognized for upholding such. Now, and it is very difficult when we want to support businesses. We all want to support the growth of businesses in all the districts we represent. However, if we advocate for certain legislature, certain processes, and then we continue to override it, it then comes to question, why did we push the legislation to begin with?
Other questions?
It's a blue law, excuse me. Why can't they sell booze on Sunday? It's ridiculous. I don't drink, but it's still ridiculous.
That's a whole other can of worms, Joe.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, to me, it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah. Other questions or comments on this? All right, before we adjourn, does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss?
Yes. I would. This is Councilwoman Friedman.
Sure, go ahead, Councilman Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is something that I have been thinking about, and I brought up to the Rules Committee. And I wanted to bring this up now just to get a temperature check and see how everyone might feel about this. My personal feeling is that when we receive the work session packets after business hours on Friday, and let me say this is not a dig at all at the city clerk, but when we receive the work session packets after business hours on Friday, I don't feel like that's enough time for me to do my due diligence in preparing for the work session on Monday, because that only gives us 3 days, but more importantly, only 1 business day. And I know there are some people who work at City Hall that say, you know, I'm available at any time, 24/7, contact me. But I just don't think that we need to expect them to be available on the weekends. I feel like if we had a deadline for people to submit legislation so that we could get the work session packet, for example, by 5 o'clock on Wednesday or something like that, that would allow us more business days and more time to prepare for the work session meetings. So I think that we should consider proposing legislation or something like that to make sure that we have the packet with enough time that we can prepare and do research and contact the appropriate department heads and representatives to be prepared for the work session meeting on Monday. I'm wondering, how do you all feel about that?
I agree with it.
I do too.
What would be enough time? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking even just 1 or 2 extra business days. You know, so if we got it by, let's say, Wednesday evening or even Thursday morning, I feel like that would be enough time to really read over the packets, which are sometimes lengthy, and not feel like I need to rush through, which sometimes I feel like I need to make sacrifices. If there's a piece of legislation that I feel like I need to focus on and do research on, then that leaves me to skim some other pieces of legislation in preparation for the work session. I mean, it seems like maybe this isn't something that other people are experiencing, but you know, it's not even just the amount of time, but the fact that 2/3 of the time that we get to look it over is on a weekend, which I don't think it's reasonable to expect that the department heads are available 24/7 over the weekend when it doesn't have to be that way.
Speaking for myself, if we get it Friday, again, you know, let's say I want to call Chuck. Now I babysit Mondays, so I can't have a conversation with these 3 kids there. And so when I get out, I've got about an hour before this meeting starts. Then I think, well, should I call Chuck? And, you know, everything would be rushed before I get any explanation of what I'm looking for. Then I basically rely on all you folks, which is very good, actually, because I think you're all very smart. So most of the time, I feel fine after everybody does their chatting about it. And it might be something I didn't really know about going into the meeting. I say, okay, great, I'm fine. Anyway, that's the way I look at it.
Can I say something?
Councilman?
I just want to say I'm more concerned, and I think it solidifies what I'm going to say by what just happened, the good dialogue that just happened, regardless of what the vote is Wednesday. My bigger concern before this COVID thing happened, and it's related, is less about when we get the packet, but how many things are expedited on the meeting on Monday. That's my bigger concern. The dialogue we just had, regardless of whether you sign something out, the whole mechanism which just happened to me supports what I'm saying. 2 people had a chance to withdraw their names. You had a chance to withdraw their sponsorship, and we just had a good conversation about it because we've had time between the previous work session and 2 nights from now when we're literally going to vote on it, when that's what's really matters. So that's my bigger concern is how many things, and the present situation aside, I think that agendas have been lightened a little bit. People have a lot to worry about with COVID, but I felt like before COVID, there was far too many things expedited that were completely unnecessary to be expedited. That's how I feel. So I don't know whether that might not be a code thing or a legislative thing, but that's how I feel about the related subject is that if you have to get it Friday afternoon and then you get it Monday and then you got to vote Wednesday, to me, that Wednesday is what really matters at the end of the day as far as when it's voted on. If you haven't had a chance, and I realize then you have Tuesday, I suppose, but that's just my thought on the related subject matter.
I absolutely agree with you, Councilman.
Me too.
As far as the packets, I don't know the total process of getting them down. It feels like it could at least be noon by Friday, but I realize it's only another half a business day, but I don't know what exact process, why it takes so long sometimes. I'm not sure. I'd like somebody to explain that to me, why it takes so long sometimes to get it, but I could live with that. That's the other part that bothers me.
Another thing that might work a little better is that as they come in through the week, I don't know if everybody puts them in on Friday, or are they putting them in throughout the week? So he could put them all together and put them all together for a packet on Friday. But meanwhile, maybe we did get a few of them throughout the week, individual things that we may want to call about,
Almost like build the agenda during the week, so to speak. So it might not be final, but at least we see some of the stuff that is ready to go.
Yeah, and then on Friday he gives us the full packet, the way he's been doing it.
And I want to add that I don't in any way mean to add undue stress to the clerk's office as well. What I'm hoping is maybe something like the deadline to submit legislation for Monday's meeting might be, let's say, Wednesday at noon, so the packet could go out Thursday at noon, something like, I'm just making up those deadlines. So not that anyone needs to rush more, and then any legislation that's submitted on Friday could be for the following meeting. Because what also, like has been brought up before, most of us have other jobs as well. I personally work most days 9 to 5. So to get the packet even noon on Friday is not enough time because I'm not able to look at that packet until after Friday. So I would love to have a chance to at least have one evening because I can, step out or during my lunch break, make a phone call, but I don't have enough time in my half-hour lunch break to look over an entire packet in one day.
I would recommend Councilman Scriggi is the chair of the Rules Committee. I would recommend you get together with the Rules Committee, Aviva and Councilman Strawn, and discuss it and bring something back to City Council, what you can agree on, what you think is reasonable. And then we'll discuss it some more.
Okay, yeah, I'm absolutely down. That was initially the email that I sent was actually to the Rules Committee. We have not met yet. We brought it to the full council first to get a temperature check. But yeah, I would love to convene a Rules Committee meeting to flesh this out further.
Councilman Scriggi, you're okay with that?
If that's what the body would like, sure.
Okay. Anything else that we want to bring up? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. The only thing that I would caution and remind everyone is that extra time is always a good thing, but I would also remind everyone to just keep in mind that flexibility is also an important aspect of this entire formula. So one of the situations that we end up in, so like, for example, Councilman Strong brought up a good point about RLs that may come forward and, they get expedited regardless of whether there's one or three of them. There's usually almost always a time sensitivity related to those factors. And when those RLs come forward, making sure that we're getting them through, obviously making sure that everyone's questions are answered regarding the RL is important as well. Because, you know, I mean, let's be honest, right? We meet formally once every other Monday at 6 and once every other Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., right? By definition, City Hall is 24/7, right? It doesn't operate Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we also want to remember that that flexibility is not just important for the mayor and the executive branch, but it's actually written into the rules in 26, if you look it up, that city council also has leeway with that as well, particularly with the city council president and the impact on the agenda, right? So I think structure is good, and I think as a process is good, but I think we also want to remember that flexibility is important as well. And we want to make sure that if, you know, in those rare situations, if something does pour into the city clerk's office at 3:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, that might be an application for a DASNY grant, for a park, for roads, for a policy proposal in the city, right? So I would definitely just want to ensure that, you know, city council holds its independence there, and we're not handicapping the city to go about doing its business proactively. So I think that's important as well. But a process and a structure is always good, of course, too.
I'm gonna piggyback on what Councilman Scriggy said. I don't, we as a council, we should not attempt to handcuff the mayor, and things move quickly, I assume. I'm not in City Hall down here, but I think things change pretty quickly. So even if we put a date on this, a time like even a Thursday at noon, something's gonna happen on Friday, something's gonna happen on Monday that we have to have some flexibility, like Councilman Scriggy is saying, because otherwise we're gonna impede the city from moving forward, and that's the last thing we wanna do. So we can discuss them,
And
once they go to committee, we can discuss them more, and they'll come back with recommendations from committee, and we'll talk about them more. Anybody have anything else you want to bring up now? Councilwoman Riley.
Just one more question, and I meant to send this out via email. I have been hearing from constituents that they would like to know an update regarding our parks and the summer employment. So I know I'm on the Parks Committee, and I meant to send this to you, Sophia, I forgot. But if we can have an update from Parks and Recs regarding, are we opening the pools? Are we closing the pools? Are we hiring? Is that possible?
I think they're probably discussing it as we speak right now, Councilwoman Riley. I'm sure their decision has been made yet, but I'm sure they're discussing it, and as soon as that decision is out, we'll certainly hear about it.
So we have to wait for it to be out to the public before we know.
We have to wait for them to make a decision, I think, before we find out what's going on. Obviously, the Parks Department is involved, the Health Department's involved, and they have to, if we're gonna hire summer help, they gotta make sure they're safe. So I'm sure a lot of discussion is going on along those lines. Other questions or comments before I adjourn? Gio.
thanks, Mr. President. Sorry about that. Yeah, and just to add on to that, Councilwoman Riley, I don't know if it's so much that we're not going to hear about that until the public hears about that. I think it's more of a thing of every municipality and every county in New York State and the United States is probably sitting around waiting to hear what funding through their respective state as well as the federal government is going to be coming down in relation to COVID-19 and the entire situation because of the lost revenue that we all collectively have been dealing with. So I think we're waiting, understandably so, to understand if there's going to be coming through something through from the state and federal government as well, because that will obviously impact the decision that many municipalities have to make about that, including Binghamton, of course.
You're saying that information has not already been shared regarding the opening of our pools and parks?
I think we would have heard about it. If it was, we would have heard about it by now.
Tomorrow morning, I'm happy to reach out to Parks. What they
Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah, and I think an announcement was made about city parks already. I think Mayor David did that, right? So for example, in New York.
And I was asking about the
No.
pools and the hiring for the summer.
Right, yeah, because all of that falls under Parks and Rec. I think tennis courts got opened back up. We also have to keep in mind the fact that due to the fact that Governor Cuomo has us doing this phased reopening, different aspects of things that are all interrelated to Parks and Rec will fall under different phases. So, and I don't even entirely believe from the research that I've done, the state government hasn't even made an entire decision on solidifying what those phases will be. So that would obviously impact that decision tree as well.
Again, thank you, Gio. But I wanted to know, because I wanted to know if a decision has been made. And since we don't know definitely, that's what my question was. So I thank you for the support, but it still doesn't answer if a decision was made and is out, and if we would know about it prior to it going to the public.
What Gio just said, we will not hear about it before the public hears about it. He's not going to call city council or the parks is not going to email city council before the public hears about it. We'll hear about it as the public hears about it, which I think is probably the right way to go. I don't know if we need prior information on that.
I think if you call them, Jared or the mayor, they'd probably tell you if they're hiring for the pools, I suppose. I don't see why they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments before I adjourn? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we'll adjourn. Thank you, everybody.